morning. We are here for a number of speed talks. There will be no questions following each talk, but if we have time at the end, we will have some questions, I hope. So first up is Charlie Outhwaite.
Hi, thank you. Yep, I'm Charlie Outhwaite. I'm a third-year PhD student at the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology in the UK. And I'm going to talk to you about my work looking at UK biodiversity change. I've added a few extra species compared to the title in the booklet, but just thought 1,000 more would be better. So biodiversity indicators are one tool that we can use to monitor biodiversity change over time. They usually look like this, with year on the x-axis and index values scaled to either 1 or 100 on the y-axis. And they usually have a single line showing change over time in populations. Now, these indicators usually rely on abundance data, and because of this reliance on abundance data, they're usually limited to a number of taxonomic groups, such as birds and butterflies, for which this kind of data is available. And we'll see this reliance if we look at a few examples. So first, at a global scale, we have the Living Planet Index. So this is a biodiversity indicator that shows change in abundance of vertebrate populations over time. Again, year on the x and index value on the y. However, this is limited in that it only covers vertebrate groups. Within Europe, we have two species-based biodiversity indicators. The first is for birds, and the second, just butterflies. And the story is the same within the UK. These indicators are very limited in their taxonomic coverage. We have one for birds, one for butterflies, and one for bats, which is meant to represent all of mammal diversity within the UK. So what about everything else? As you can see, we're missing a lot of invertebrates. There are no plants in there. So I've been trying to answer this question for the UK. What is happening to wider biodiversity other than the usual taxonomic groups such as birds and butterflies? To do this, I've used UK biological records data, which are presence-only data, usually collected by volunteers as part of a recording scheme or society. And I've done this for 34 taxonomic groups and over 12,000 species. So I've included groups such as vascular plants, lichens and bryophytes, various bugs and beetles, numerous flies, and loads of other creepy crawly things such as spiders, centipedes, and fungus gnats. Who doesn't love a fungus gnat? And to analyse this data, I've used a modified version of a Bayesian occupancy model, which is specifically designed to work with low recording intensity data, such as these used here. So I'm going to show you some preliminary results now. All these indicators have year on the x-axis and index values scaled to 100 on the y-axis. And as these are using occurrence data, these indicators show change in occurrence over time of the average species within the groups shown here. So if we take all terrestrial animals, so that includes things like bees, ants, hoverflies, we get a pretty boring graph, if I'm honest. It's a straight line, so there hasn't been much change between 1970 and 2011, the most recent year shown here. However, if we split this indicator by taxonomic group, there's a lot of variation within this indicator. So there are a few groups that are showing strong increases, such as the ants shown here, and other groups showing very strong declines, such as the mollusks at the bottom there. So there's a lot of variation hidden within this single line. However, if we look at freshwater species, we get a very different story. So here we've got a strong decline between 1970 and the mid-90s, and a very strong increase or recovery up to the present or most recent year. And this increase is quite interesting as it matches up very well with the implementation of the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive in 1991. However, I haven't tested this association. And if we split this by taxonomic group, we see that all taxa included in this indicator follow this same U-shaped response. So strong declines in the early years and then increases in more recent years. Shown here for aquatic bugs at the top and caddisflies at the bottom. If we look at some botanical groups, we see another story of recovery. Perhaps quite a strong recovery for lichens, shown on the left, and more recent recoveries for bryophytes on the right. And it's possible that this has something to do with improvements in air quality within the UK. So hopefully I've been able to show you that occurrence data allows us to monitor more than just the usual groups, such as birds and butterflies. And by doing this, we can see that not everything is declining, which is often the story that we're given following these indicators. and that recovery is possible. And we've been able to show this for some of the less charismatic groups within the UK, but nevertheless are very important. Just a few thank yous, particularly for the thousands of volunteers that collect the data, and the 32 recording schemes and societies and their organisers for helping me collate and organise this data. Thank you for listening.
Absolutely perfect timing there from Charlie. Well done. So, no pressure. Great. And now we have Rebecca Nemec.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca Nemec, and I'm a PhD candidate, third-year PhD candidate in the Interdisciplinary Environmental Program at Stanford. And today I'm going to be talking about some of my work linking socioeconomic factors to the distribution of an invasive tree species in Hawaii. So what explains and predicts the distribution of an invasive species across the landscape? This is a question ecologists have long sought to answer, because understanding what drives invasion can often give us clues into how to better manage invasion. So ecologists have identified numerous factors that may help predict the distribution of an invasive species. And these include environmental factors, so climate and topography, biotic interactions, and human influences. So in traditional models of invasion, humans have been assumed to influence invasive species in two main ways. First, by influencing propagules pressure, or bringing in invasive species on roadways or trails. And the second is by influencing habitat suitability, or through land use or development. But increasingly, we're dealing with more human-dominated landscapes, so peri-urban and urban landscapes. And in such landscapes, humans might influence invasive species distributions in another way, by taking direct action to manage invasive species on their property and in their community. So who here has a yard, and who has weeded on their yard before? Raise your hand. Yes, and so those actions may actually influence where invasive species are throughout the landscape. So it's therefore possible then that socioeconomic factors, so things like income and property size, which might influence people's propensity to take action, may actually be linked with invasion and may help us better predict the probability of invasion in human-dominated landscapes. So this led me to my two main research questions for this project. The first is, how important are socioeconomic factors for understanding the distribution of and changes in the distribution of an invasive species across a peri-urban landscape? And the second is, what types of residents and what types of communities are more likely to facilitate or prevent the spread of an invasive species? So I examined these questions through a case study of Albizia invasion in Hawaii. Now, Albizia is a nitrogen-fixing invasive tree species that causes an immense amount of ecological and socioeconomic damage. And so as you can see here in the picture on the right, Albizia can actually fall down in high winds on roads and power lines and people's homes. And we found in recent surveys of residents that because of these huge socioeconomic impacts, many residents have begun taking action to combat Albizia on their property and in their community. And so it's therefore possible then these actions may influence the distribution of Albizia across the landscape. So to examine our research questions, the first thing we had to do was create a map of Albizia distributions and changes in Albizia distributions. And we did this through remote sensing data. So we used 2009 WorldView 2 satellite data and 2016 remote sensing data from the Carnegie Airborne Observatory. And to create these maps that you see here from the raw remote sensing data, we used a support vector machine algorithm to classify pixels into Albizia and non-Albizia based on their spectral signatures. And that produced the following maps that you see here. We then gathered 56 different predictor variables that we thought might influence the distribution of Albizia across the landscape. So these included socioeconomic factors, and these were obtained from census data and tax map key data. and environmental and land use or development variables. And then we used boosted regression trees or machine learning to link these socioeconomic factors and environment and land use variables to examine which were the most important for predicting Albizia distributions across the landscape. So these are some of our preliminary results. We found that at the scale of a large housing subdivision, socioeconomic variables slightly improved our ability to predict Albizia distributions. And we find that two variables in particular are really important. And so these are absenteeism and low-income landowners. And these two variables increased invasion probability. And our next step will be to examine whether these same variables predict changes in distribution of Albizia over time. So I wanted to thank you for your time today, and thank you to our funders and supporters for this work.
Again, wonderful timing. Thank you very much, Rebecca. No challenge there for the next speakers. So, next up is Aaron Hogue.
Good morning. Today I'll be talking about using driving transects to survey bat populations. Like many organisms, bats face a variety of threats. In the eastern United States, these include habitat loss, wind turbines, and white nose syndrome. These threats continue to expand geographically, and it is unclear how their complex interactions with factors such as migratory patterns ultimately impact bat populations across the landscape. Therefore, it is increasingly important to monitor bats over large geographic areas. Unfortunately, monitoring bats in many habitats across large areas each night with most traditional techniques can be extremely labor-intensive, as in the case of mist nets, or costly, as in the case of standalone passive detectors, placing them out of reach for many investigators. One possible solution is driving transects. Driving transects were first developed for surveying the bat fauna of Ireland. They involve driving slowly along a predetermined route while recording bats with a bat detector affixed to the vehicle. The advantage of this approach is that it allows you to sample a variety of habitats across a large area each night with a single person using a single, relatively low-cost detector. There are many disadvantages as well. For example, the array of statistical analyses available for testing hypotheses about bat ecology from these type of data are limited. Perhaps more importantly, airflow and driving noise can render recordings useless, particularly with higher sensitivity microphones. One possible solution is to continue using a transect, but only record at stationary sampling points along the route. The purpose of the study was to do just that, to compare continuous versus stationary sampling along the same routes, and also to compare high versus low sensitivity microphones. We did this on the Delmarva Peninsula in the eastern United States by setting up 26 18-kilometer transects, each with 10 stationary sampling points spread 2 kilometers apart. And we sampled both continuously and at each sampling location for 12 minutes. Here are the results of the continuous versus stationary comparison. Unfortunately, our worst fears were realized with the high sensitivity microphone, and there was simply too much background noise from wind flow over the microphone surface to be able to analyze that data. So I can only present the results from the lower sensitivity microphone, which was an EM3 by Wildlife Acoustics. As you can see, the results are roughly comparable. The stationary sampling sites yielded slightly fewer call sequences per minute, 0.067 versus 0.073. However, that was compensated for by being able to identify slightly more of those to species, 24.5 versus 20%. And we were able to identify the exact same 4 species. So overall, we would say the results were pretty similar between these two approaches. However, when you compare high versus low sensitivity microphones, again, we could only do this at stationary sites. This is where the results really get interesting. For over 52 hours of recording at 260 sites, you can see there are dramatically different results for the two different microphones. We recorded roughly 17 times more calls per minute, or call sequences per minute, with the higher sensitivity microphone compared to the lower sensitivity microphone. And of those calls, we were able to identify almost 3 times more to species, 65 versus 24%. The end result, over 52 hours of recording, we documented 3,500 calls with the higher sensitivity microphone versus only 211 with the lower sensitivity microphone. Over 2,000 calls identified to species with the higher sensitivity microphone versus only 52 with the lower. Probably as importantly, we identified 3 additional species with the higher sensitivity microphone, and these include less common bats, as well as members of the genus Myotis, like little brown bats, which are of great conservation concern because they are particularly heavily impacted by white nose syndrome. So in conclusion, using the same microphone, we yielded roughly similar results between stationary and continuous. However, if these results hold up using different experimental techniques and different microphones, the ability to use higher sensitivity microphones at stationary sites versus continuous, and the vastly better results that we were able to obtain with that higher sensitivity microphone suggests that stationary sampling along driving transects is preferable to continuous sampling. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Aaron. And technology, yeah? We now have Paolo Corti.
Hi, everyone. Well, Huemul is a deer species endemic from the southern part of South America, specifically from the Andes, has a long distribution along the Andes. It's an endangered species, so because mostly the abundance has got low, and also the distribution range is lower than the 50% of the original distribution. So because of that, we did this research trying to investigate and see what is this potential distribution of suitable habitat for this animal, and also to see the impact of climate, especially climate change, because of this long distribution on the population dynamic of this animal. What we did, we set up a Maxent model to see the distribution of the animal, how this is going to change in relation to 2 scenarios of climate change. The best one, an increase less than or around 1 Celsius degrees in the next 100 years. Another one, the worst one, when an increase of around 3.7 degrees in the next 50 or 100 years. So we use work-limb variables to investigate this. For the dynamics, we use this stuff. We use data from a population in the fjord of southern Chile, where there is a collection of more than 12 years of census data. So we use an ARIMA model and to see if which climatic variables or environmental variables are affecting the dynamic of these animals and what type of dynamics is driving this population. Here in the results, you see the current situation in your left, and then the 2 scenarios of climate change. So there is a shrinkage of the habitat suitability. The most suitable is in red, and in green is the less suitable. Toward the south, so the concentration of suitable habitat that are going to be lost if the climate change predictions are right, are going to concentrate in the south part of the Huemul distribution. Now, if we overlap this with the protection areas in Argentina and Chile, we see that there is an apparently increment in the percentage of protection, and that is mostly because the accumulation of the good habitat in the south, but it's not an increment of protected areas. Here you see also there is a a large area that's important for the animal in the Argentinian side, in the central Patagonia, that is not protected, currently protected, and is a lot of, there is a lot of factors that could affect badly these animals. Even you see here, there is a population remaining in the north part of the distribution that almost disappeared with the best scenario and totally disappeared with the worst scenario of climate change. In the dynamic models, we found that the winter precipitation and winter temperature were the main drivers for the population dynamics. Here, and this is the Royama's triangle, we see that the best project, the best model is explained by a delayed density dependence, so mostly related with predation or maternal effects on the offspring. But we can't rule out the direct density dependence, but we need more data to be sure if that is also working in this population. Now, if we use the same information from the same models, and we try to predict with that information what is going to happen in the future with these animals. For example, if we increment the percentage of precipitation or temperature, in both cases, at least this population of Huemul that is located in the southern part, where is the best possible option for the animals, are going to a quasi-extinction process, below 50 animals for this population. So they can suffer all these different things that happen with the small populations. So in conclusions, there would be a loss of suitable habitat for the Huemul if the predictions of climate change occur. Most relevant suitable areas for the Huemul would be concentrated in the south, specifically in the Chilean part, and also climate change would affect negatively the Huemul, even in the southern part where is the best area. Thanks a lot.
Wonderful. Well done, Carlos. Oh, sorry, Paulo, sorry. And now we have my colleague, Carlos Saavedra.
Nice. Good morning. I'm gonna tell you about a part of my research that I was working years ago with some other researchers from Colombia, and I had to clarify that I wanna talk about distribution, because we have a short time to make another approximation thinking in survival. Okay. When we talk about distribution, we think in geographic range of a species, and we think mainly in three aspects: the size, the shape, and some limits where this distribution could be present in area. But when we talk about distribution, there are another aspect that could be important for the species. Is the internal structure of that range. That is one of the aspects that species distribution could be used to identify suitable habitats or where could be the presence of the species. This is the basis to build potential distribution models. There are some models, some ideas about how is this structure into the area of the geographic range of a species. One model is this, is the optimum response surface. A simple text about this is that the species have the mainly optimal space in the center of this distribution. There are three assumptions linking with it. That one is that the species could be responding in similar way in any part of this range, is the first one. A second one is that there are autocorrelation in spatial variables. And a third one is that favorability is better in the center, but it's less in the limit of this range. Okay? How can we explore that? We use a model, a species to make this approximation. Is the Pacarana, it's Dinomys branniki, it's a mammals of neotropical environment that is present in the north of South America. Is the largest rodent mammals in the Andes of Colombia and in the Andes of all the South America. And we have record more or less 100 records of presence of the species. We make our best efforts to model this distribution. We build a distribution model, a potential distribution model, and we obtain that some variables are linked with the presence of this species. A variable linked with factor of topography, of climatic, and vegetation. Okay? We analyze what factors are linked with the presence of the species, and we saw some tendency. We saw that the topography is important for all the species distribution, but when we saw this analysis for different regions of the range of the species, we saw that there are two tendencies, or different tendencies, along the distribution of the species. You can see that in all distribution, topography is very important, but not the same importance is for all the two regions that we analyze, north and south. In the north, I know the field, I work too much in there, but not much in the south. Well, our conclusion about this is that the heterogeneity is important for this species. It could be obvious that heterogeneity is a law for wild, but we saw that the heterogeneity is also variable in the distribution of this species. This could be saying us that the favorability is not similar to that model that we saw in the beginning. We don't see a center of suitability. We have different areas of suitability along the distribution, and different factors are linked with the presence of this species. We have a hypothesis. We have the interaction that could be pressuring, make pressure to the species, and could be make a result thinking in population differentiation, north and south. Okay? Thanks for your attention, for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Now next is Eduardo Alexandrino.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Eduardo Alexandrino. I'm a postdoc researcher at University of São Paulo, Brazil. And I will change a little bit the subject. Let's talk about promote citizen science in agricultural landscapes, increase data useful for bird conservation. Well, sorry. Well, we know that citizen science is a very useful tool for data collection in a variety of conservation projects. But we need to remember about bird watchers, because bird watchers are naturally citizen scientists. They like to go outside, they like to go in the field, take pictures, have your own species list, and all of this for fun. They're useful. And, oh sorry, but we have a problem. The bird watchers, there are a huge number only in North America and parts of Europe, which is very useful for citizen science program. But in Brazil, the numbers of bird watchers is still increasing. We have low bird watchers over there. And when we talk about Brazilian bird watchers, I have my question. Are they going to agricultural landscapes? And why I'm asking this? Because this is my study area. It's a southeast Brazil. It's a Corumbataí River Basin. It's agricultural landscape, of course. It's almost 200 kilometers from São Paulo, the biggest city of Brazil. And the forest patches inside of these agricultural landscapes has less bird diversity when we compare about national and state parks. So this could be more attractable for bird watchers than agricultural landscapes, and because of this I have my doubts. Well, it is possible to have a citizen science program using current Brazilian bird watchers in agricultural landscapes. So because of this, I'm doing my research. I'm trying to assess in bird watchers' willingness in visiting forest patches in these landscapes, and which kind of a characteristics these bird watchers are expecting now. So I'm using online Google interviews, and I spread this for social media, bird watchers groups. I'm still in the beginning, as you can see. I started in April, but I have a good some previous results to share with you. Well, I asked the forest patch that you are trying to find. They should be bird species that you admire and should be in a safe place. And both answers of my responders says, yeah, of course, I need birds and a safe place. But I asked it also, it should have an other leisure option nearby, for example, waterfalls. And most part of my responders say, no, I don't care about this. Give me just birds in a safe place. Very good. I have another question too. Which is the most important characteristic to consider when you choose one forest patch for bird watching? And most part of my responders says, please give me a forest patch with a good environmental condition, high number of species, and easy access. Good. And most part of my responders say, and I would travel more than 100 kilometers to visit a forest patch like this. It's awesome because most part of Brazilian bird watchers is still not living inside of São Paulo, the biggest city of Brazil, so it could be very useful. Well, but I have a second objective too. I'm assessing Brazilian bird watchers' skills in watch bird inside of the forest. Are they expert enough? And why I'm asking this, because bird watching in Brazil is still new. So to test this, I'm doing banding bird survey on 3 forest patches of that agricultural landscapes and putting some unique color sequence on each bird. As you can see in this picture, see? And of course, I'm releasing these birds, and each kind of all of my interviewer, all my responders, I'm inviting these people to go for my forest patch and try to find these birds. Of course, following field protocol. If you see the bird, please take a note of which kind of a color band you saw, which kind of species, where you found it. It's very useful for me. And try pictures. Unfortunately, for this step, I still have some field results, but as you can see in this picture, we have some bird watchers there having fun. Only 15 bird watchers visited my places yet, and 13 banded birds were recorded. So please wait for some months, maybe in the future, my numbers will be higher. So it could be awesome to test, to have my good answers for my questions. So, well, what's the next? Until the next year, we'll do more interview, more bird watchers invitations, and of course involve locals. And I will release an app. It's very useful for field protocol. It will be more easy to collect the data and upload the data useful for my questions, for my research. And why I'm doing this? Because I'm trying to consolidate a research of bird monitoring, species distribution inside of these forest patches, as you can see in this picture. And of course, the bird function in forest patch restoration, because as you can see here, we have old forests in some part of this forest fragments and passive restored forests. I'm thinking birds will birds is helping this spread, this increase of this forest. So, and all of this based on Citizen Science program. Okay? So thank you so much for your attention. If you're going to Brazil, please contact me and go to my forest fragments and try to find me if you can. Thank you so much. Oops. Sorry about this.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Eduardo. Really, you've got to love birds. So next up we have Carolina Ocampo Ariza.
Thank you. Thanks, I'm just gonna try to move this to see if you can actually see me. So I'm Carolina Ocampo. I come from Göttingen University, and I'm going to tell you a little bit today about our research with ant-following birds in Cameroon and their response to forest loss and industrial oil palm plantations. So it is widely accepted that habitat loss and habitat fragmentation is one of the main drivers of biodiversity loss, and we know that that is mainly because of us and because of the expansion of the agricultural frontier. And that expansion is mostly due to the increase in industrial oil plantations, not only in Central Africa, but also in many areas of Asia and South America as well. And we also know that birds do not respond linearly to this forest loss in many cases. So you can either decrease linearly due to forest loss, or you can have this critical threshold below which the decrease rate is way faster. So what the idea is that Afrotropical and following birds are really good indicators of habitat loss. They follow ants of the genus Dorylus, and they have this facultative commensalism with the ants, and they depend on the ants a lot. So when you have less ants due to less humidity in areas without forests, you have less birds. You have significantly smaller flocks with less species and less individuals. So based on this, we thought maybe we can use ant-following birds to establish forest cover thresholds and to know how much forest we need to conserve. So what we did was that we visited this really nice area in southwest Cameroon that has 3 different landscapes. So one protected area, one agroforestry matrix, which has very small farms embedded in natural forest, and industrial oil palm plantations. And what we did was that we established many plots there around villages, and we assessed forest cover through Landsat, and then we modeled the response of our encounter rates and the species richness of all the birds through multivariate adaptive regression splines. And we found approximately 6,000 bird records, and from those, approximately 979 were from the ant followers. So what did we find? Effectively, industrial oil palm plantations hold way less ant-following bird species and ant-following bird individuals. And so yeah, so from approximately 20 species of ant-following birds that we can find in that region, only 9 were present in the industrial oil palm plantations. And if you see here, pink is industrial oil palm plantation, so you can see that we also have way less records than in the other 2 landscapes. We couldn't find a clear threshold. There is a linear decline of the birds due to habitat loss, to forest loss, but they are clearly gone below 25% of forest cover. And the most sensitive species actually disappear at way higher rate, at a way higher percentage, so they are gone below 52% of forest. And interestingly, we have these 3 species, the eastern bearded greenball, the shining drongo, and the white-tailed ant thrush. And the ant-tailed white thrush is super important because it's a very specialized ant follower, so it is key for the assemblage of these ant-following bird flocks. If it's gone, it doesn't sing, and then the other birds have no idea that the ants are actually there. So what can we conclude from this study? Industrial oil palm plantations seem to be a very strong barrier for ant-following bird species. At least 11 of the ant-following birds cannot even cross these areas. So this highlights the relevance of connectivity in this landscape. It still has a lot of forest, but we have to be careful. We need to keep it well connected. Traditional agroforestry systems seem to be very valuable for the conservation of ant followers, and this has a lot to do with planning in Cameroon. With this inevitable expansion of the oil palm plantations, we need to take into account that the forests need to stay connected, and we need to conserve a very large area of forest if we want to keep bird diversity in the region. And we would like to thank the Heinrich Böll Foundation and the Foundation for Ecological Education, as well as the Volkswagen Foundation, who funded our research. And we would also like to thank very dearly the village councils and the local field assistants who helped us with this very long sampling process, and as well as the administration of the national park and the palm oil company, which is the industrial oil palm plantation there. Thank you very much. If you want to know more about this, please go to Denis Kupch's presentation this afternoon. He's going to tell you about other birds in the same region. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Carolina. Birds in Africa, my favorite. So next up, we have Tiwange Gawa.
Good morning, everyone. I work with the Museums of Malawi, and I'm going to share with you some work that we did in collaboration with our colleagues in Zambia. So the Lilian lovebird is an endemic small parrot species that is endemic to the Zambesian region, and it occurs in the Zambia, Malawi, and in Zimbabwe. And it's specialized to a woodland type known as Mopani woodland. And we wanted to look at, but it's got a sort of patchy distribution, and we wanted to look at what is exactly about these woodlands and the woodland structure is that sort of determines its occurrence in these areas. And we wanted to sort of find a tool to give to conservation managers to be able to say these are the type of areas you should conserve for these birds. So what we started with first is to look at all the records that are out there about where the bird has been sighted in Zambia, which is its core distribution area. And we looked at GBIF, we put out calls in the birding newsletters for everybody to send in their records. And we built a model in Maxent using what we knew about the species. And when we had the area focus, where we should focus, we selected 200 points to go out and sample, and our sampling unit was a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer square, and we sampled within it these circular plots with about 15 meters diameter, and we sampled all the vegetation stuff, DBH, height, type of species, of tree species, the ground cover, even looked at what the birds were there. So what did we find? Of those 200 points that we wanted to sample, we could only access 116 just because of road and accessibility in the area. And of these 116, we could only actually take the measurements we wanted in about 62, simply because many of them did not qualify. Our tree, the definition of a tree was that it had to be at least 10 centimeters DBH. And many of these didn't have this. Many of these were actually scrub Mopani woodland. We're not even woodland, we should just call them scrub areas. And from the 62 that we did, from the 54 that we did sample, we only recorded the lovebirds in 20 of those areas. And much of the reasons why we had such a low area, places that we could measure is because of habitat disturbance. These areas have completely changed to what some of the vegetation maps that we used said it was. Many of them are no longer woodland areas, and many of it is because of human disturbance. So this just shows you where we did see the lovebirds. So we saw the lovebirds from Lower Zambezi National Park, going up to South Luangwa, all the way up north there. It was very frustrating because this was 15 days in the field and you were not able to see the species that you wanted to see. So when we did look at the habitat measurements where we were able to measure it, it was very clear that there was a strong relationship with the the size of the trees. So that the size, the DBH and the height of the trees played a very big factor in terms of the occurrence of the species. 75% of where we did record the love beds, it was in areas where the DBH was more than 30 centimeters. So what does this say? Well, it has come out very clearly that the lily and lovebirds occurs in Cathedral Mopani, the big, tall, large Mopani, and that the foresters refer to as Cathedral Mopani. But these large Mopanis inside protected areas, that's where we saw that they are actually protected. The lily and lovebirds occurs both in protected and outside of protected areas. But the rate that the woodlands, the trees are being cleared in outside of protected areas is really high. And currently CITES has a ban of other hardwood species in the area, so which means that there's probably even going to be more demand for the Mopani wood in the coming future. And at the moment, only in Malawi there's trees protected as a species. In the other countries it is not, and there needs to be some kind of an intergovernmental sort of approach, because it's not just this species that is specialized. There's also another lovebird which is endangered, the black-cheeked, in the same area. So thank you very much. Just thank the British Ecological Society that sponsored the work, and EFA and WWF who made it possible for me to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiwonge. Wonderful to have another Birds in Africa talk. And now our final talk of the speed session. By Katerina Cosmopoulos.
Hi everybody, I'm Katerina and I'm here to tell you about an ongoing project on the Peruvian Amazon. So this project takes place in the Madre de Dios region. It's one of the largest departments in Peru and also the most diverse region. Our study area is on the lower part of the Las Piedras River section. And as you can see, it's on the upper section is protected by a national park, but the lower is not. It's not under current state protection. And this river is very important because it's one of the longest tributaries in Madre de Dios. It's a very remote area and it hasn't been studied very much. It's also important for the Brazil nut harvesting, and it's home of some of the last uncontacted tribes on Earth. But it's also very important for biodiversity. We have more than 600 species of birds here, and it's important for jaguars. And lately we have a report of 7 individuals per square kilometers of ocelots. Our study site is called Las Piedras Amazon Center, and it's surrounded by many concessions, about 200 of them, that is managed each of these areas is managed by its own concessionaire, so they have different interests. And in some of these areas we have a lot of deforestation and illegal timber extraction. So our study here is trying to determine which species of mammals remains in the area and what are their numbers. For that, we walk about 52 kilometers and spend 1,700 hours in camera trapping. And we could record 20 species of medium-sized and large mammals. Among them, we have the Priodontes and some collared pecaries, the favorite meat for hunters. This graph tells us that most of the species that we have recorded in the survey are the ones that could be present here. So, but if we compare the numbers that we got from this study with previous reports in 2003, 4, 5, and 6, we can see that the abundance of these mammals have dropped dramatically. And this could be mainly to deforestation, as you can see on the graph to your right, because it has been increasing a lot on the last few years. And this has also been studied by the monitoring of the Andean and Amazon project that have reported deforestation on the southern border of the Las Piedras Amazon Center, as you can see in this image, on 2015 and 2016. Las Piedras Amazon Center is actually acting like a buffer, preventing deforestation on the left side of the river. But this is not a regional problem, but it's also a national problem, as you can see, and it's due mainly to illegal gold mining and agriculture. We don't have illegal gold mining in the area, but we do have a lot of native communities on reserved territories for uncontacted people, which are under big pressures, especially coming from the Brazil border, which is forcing them to move south and get in contact with the native communities that live in the area. So that's why it's so important to protect this region. So, as I told you before, this is an ongoing project, so we are expanding our surveys to 3 other sites. One of them in Monte Salvado, very close to a native community, to the non-contact people. And also, we want to keep generating data and look for solutions for people that live around and to, convince them to stop cutting trees in the area. Together with some other initiatives, we are conforming an association to protect the Purus and also the uncontacted indigenous people. So, thank you very much, and thanks Amazon, which is the company that runs the study site.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Katerina. Now, we have about 6 or 7 minutes for questions. So perhaps the speakers could just come up to the front so they can get to the mic as necessary. So if you have a question or two, please raise your hand. Okay. Any questions? Come on. Right, okay, I have a... great. You have to shout, because I don't think we have a microphone. Do you want to come up and ask your question? Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, come on.
Two scenarios of WEMUL is interesting, but maybe like a suggestion, you can include other variables to better the modeling of the WEMUL, maybe disease or preference vegetation that the WEMUL consume. You consider in the future include more variables?
Yes, it is exactly. We want to plan to include more of those variables. We have some areas, some populations that have been surveyed for that, but you see it's a long distribution, and we don't know much about the animals. Most of the studies, like with quantitative data, are based in 2 populations in all this distribution.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? I have one question. So, well, I have several questions. Carolina, did you notice any change in the non-ant following species relation to the different habitat types, which might have been linked perhaps because they were predators, or because of habitat change perhaps linked to the yeah.
Those are exactly the details that you're going to find in Dennis Koop's presentation this afternoon. But I can tell you that I also worked with some occasional ant followers. They are generalists and they are opportunistic, and what we saw was that those species actually increased with forest loss. So in deforested areas, they are totally abundant, and they can also eat occasionally the same stuff, the same insects as the ant followers, but the problem is that they are not very good at assembling the community. So if we have only these opportunistic species, we actually won't have ant following bird flocks.
Anyone else? Last chance. Oh, well, I'd like to thank all our speakers for some really great science and also for keeping to time. Well done all. And I think that shows the value of these speed sessions because you get concentrated science and lots of it. So thank you very much, everyone.